the inauguration of Donald J. Trump as the 47th President of the United States, his second term in office, making a return to the White House today after a 4-year absence. And as we come on the air, the President-elect just arrived at the White House for the ceremonial tea with the outgoing President, Joe Biden. They attended a service this morning, the Trumps did, at St. John's Church in Washington with former and soon-to-be First Lady Melania Trump. But in less than 2 hours, President-elect will take the oath of office at the Capitol inside for the second time, and Senator J.D. Vance will be sworn in alongside him as Vice President. This is a day for history. It is a historic day, in part because today's inauguration will look a lot different than President Biden's 4 years ago. This time, Mr. Trump's swearing-in ceremony will be held indoors in the Capitol Rotunda due to today's extremely frigid weather. It's the first time we've seen the ceremony moved inside since Ronald Reagan's second inauguration back in 1985. That's the view from above. That's the bird's eye view of the rotunda. President-elect Trump returning to power with, as mentioned a moment ago, a new vice president. Today really is Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's day, a day of pomp and circumstance and celebration for them. It is also a day when they plan to hit the ground running. They are eager to put their agenda, Trump calls it his mandate, in place. NBC News has learned this morning that the president-elect already plans to sign at least 50 executive orders and actions today. A president that will like and has always liked scorecards, in this case, having the most executive orders. Any moment now, we will see the Trumps and the Bidens leave the White House and make their way to the Capitol for today's big moment. Shortly after 11 a.m. Eastern, the swearing ceremony will begin inside the Capitol around 11:40 a.m. Donald Trump will officially become the President of the United States. He will take the oath of office and deliver his inaugural address around 11:47. That time symbolic as he becomes the nation's 47th president. The theme: strength, unity, and fairness. As for this afternoon, the new president will participate in a signing ceremony at Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. This has been turned into a public viewing site because today's ceremonies and the parade and some of this outdoor event, that has all been moved inside, and we are expecting that the president-elect, then president, will sign some of those executive orders and actions that he's talked about. A lot of comparisons will go on today. Unlike last time, the pandemic, tonight's inaugural balls are back on to celebrate the big day. We have it all covered, and our team is fanned out across Washington on what looks like a gorgeous day. And in fact, weather-wise is, if you don't mind the temperature. That's another story. Let's bring in, start with Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker and NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson. This is not the first inauguration for either of them. Hallie, let's start with you. It's enormous, I'll tell you that. Listen, this is going to be, I think, a historic day for all the reasons that we've talked about, because of the comparisons that you referenced, but also because for President-elect Trump, he is intentionally making this a day where he is flexing his political muscle in a show of force. You talked about those executive orders. He intends to hit the ground running. We are already getting a sense now from our reporting here on what he will do. Key executive orders on immigration that she said he would do: mass deportations, a national emergency. He will attempt to end birthright citizenship. Executive orders on the economy. Executive orders on some of these culture war issues that came up during the campaign that we expect him to sign later on today. He only did one last year, right? Or last time he was president in 2017. So he will set some records here potentially. Can I just pause you, because these are the former speakers of the House, Republican speakers of the House right here. Kevin McCarthy, we saw Newt Gingrich there. There we go, John Boehner. So these are men who have held what might be the hardest job in Washington, currently held by Speaker Mike Johnson. And Kristen, we want to bring you into this conversation. They seem to be inside the rotunda, some of the invited guests that will witness the swearing in today. Donald Trump, it's in many ways, this is, vintage Donald Trump. He is who he is, but he's also changed. It'll be a different kind of administration. He's served for 4 years now. He knows the job. It's a very different moment than when he was first sworn into office. He knows the job. He's had 4 years to reflect on the job. He comes in with majorities in the Senate, narrow majority in the House, but with a lot more allies. When he first entered Washington, he was really here to break it. Now, he's got allies in every quarter of the Republican Party. That's not to say there aren't divisions. That's not to say there's not going to be fierce debate over issues like Ukraine and tariffs and taxes. But
by and large, he is going to be met with less resistance from within his own party.
He's marveled about it to some extent, saying, hey, people like me now.
That's right. He says, people like me now, and it applies to his cabinet as well. When he appointed his first cabinet, his first go-around, there were some people who thought they were there to be a check on Donald Trump, the first president, Donald Trump. But now it's very different. He's appointed people who are very loyal to him. The discussion, will there be someone who can stand up to him and say, I disagree? We'll have to see how that unfolds. We know that he likes disagreement. He likes debate. But ultimately, we're seeing a very different Washington. And remember, not just within the Republican Party, but within the business world, the tech world, the billionaire CEOs who we know are already going there as a part of these ceremonies that are unfolding in front of our eyes, from Jeff Bezos to Mark Zuckerberg to Elon Musk, who he has made one of his top advisors.
And all of them previously, at different points in their lives, somewhat openly hostile in some cases to Donald Trump. And now, I mean, in the case of Elon Musk, his new BFF, I mean, those two are essentially inseparable. Elon Musk has a huge influence over the United States government by SpaceX, by Tesla, I mean, by owning X, the social media platform. And that influence has grown exponentially with this friendship with Donald Trump.
And by the way, it's not just the influence that Elon Musk has, it is the business interest that he has in the decision-making of the federal government, which has raised some of these conflict of interest questions, given that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have developed this really close relationship. You saw him even just yesterday at that kind of last big rally before the swearing in, Elon Musk on stage, as he has been so often throughout the course of this campaign, and now obviously this transition. The other piece of this too, he is set to lead this DOGE, Department of Governmental Efficiency, not an actual governmental agency. They are going to be outside the typical bounds of the federal government, but they will have potentially enormous influence. He wants to cut billions of dollars from the federal budget. That's his mission.
We're looking inside this is the overflow room. We're looking inside the Capitol Rotunda a moment ago. Those are the tickets, these seats to get in this city right now because of the last-minute changes. Today's ceremony was moved inside for the first time in 40 years because of the bitter cold in the forecast. Let's go to Al Roker now for the latest on that, Al.
Well, guys, again, beautiful blue skies, but it's awfully chilly, but it's also winter. It's not so bad. We've got beautiful clear skies. Temperature right about 28 degrees, which isn't that bad. We're looking 29 actually now. Temperatures will drop into the low 20s by later this afternoon. The wind chills will be the big problem. But this isn't the coldest day, as we mentioned. Ronald Reagan had the coldest inaugural. 1985, it was 7 degrees, again, held in the Capitol Rotunda. The warmest, you had to go 4 years earlier. Ronald Reagan, 55 degrees back in 1981. Now, the snowiest was 1909. William Howard Taft, almost 10 inches of snow. I actually remember that. And the rainiest, 1937, FDR, a rain total of about 1.75 inches. So we've had much worse weather. We've had better weather, but all in all, the weather today, gorgeous blue skies. And as long as you bundle up, everything's fine. Guys?
All right, Al, thank you. I want to get over to Craig Melvin. He's made his way to Emancipation Hall at the Capitol. So this is a new venue for this year's inauguration. It's the overflow room for those who don't fit in the rotunda. So, Craig, what's the scene there?
Well, quite frankly, it's a bit of a party right now, Savannah. Good morning to you. As you mentioned, this has become sort of a makeshift overflow area. And of course, the swearing-in is going to happen in the rotunda. About 800 people will fit there. Behind me here at Emancipation Hall, roughly another 1,300, and then you've got about 500 more next to us in sort of a theater. But again, keep in mind, this was an inauguration where they were expecting some 200,000 people. So at the very last minute, they basically had to call the list. So it's unclear at this point precisely who is here in the overflow area and who is upstairs in the rotunda. We did just see those images a few moments ago of the former speakers of the House. The expectation is those folks and elected members of Congress, most of those folks are going to be in the rotunda. We've gotten some reporting that some of the spouses may be here in the overflow area. But just a few moments ago, when those images of the president-elect, soon-to-be President Donald J. Trump, and those images of him and First Lady Melania Trump, along with the Bidens, when those pictures popped up outside the White House, there was a roar. Here inside Emancipation Hall, folks very excited who are here. Again, keep in mind, we've got a lot of folks who paid good money, bought tickets to come to Washington, D.C. with the expectation that they were going to be able to witness history up close. A lot of those folks are going to have to watch on monitors outside. We can tell you here at Emancipation Hall later this afternoon, after the actual swearing in, there is going to be something called First Honors. It is a military ceremony that is akin to a reviewing of the troops. It's going to look like a reviewing of the troops, but it is not. It's called First Honors. We're also expecting that after the president leaves the rotunda, at some point he'll make his way here, and he will address the hundreds of folks who've assembled here in the hall. I'm not sure if you can make it out behind me, but there's already a podium in place at the foot of the statue here in anticipation of those remarks from then the 47th president of these United States, Donald J. Trump.
All right, Craig, thanks very much. There will be a lot of viewing of today, but in different places, not only in this city, but certainly around the world. We want to go to Tom Yamas. He's made his way to the Capital One Arena. That's where the indoor inauguration celebration will take place later this afternoon. Tom, set the scene for us.
Hey, Lester, great to be with you. You know, one of the iconic images of any inauguration is the outdoor parade. That's not going to happen this year because of the cold weather. It will happen sort of inside here. This is the Capital One Arena. We understand a parade at some point will roll through here after President-elect Trump has done all of his events inside the rotunda. I want to show you on stage what they have set up on stage because it's kind of interesting. They have a podium right there, which he'll be delivering his speech when he gets here to about 20,000 supporters. And then you can see the presidential seal. Those are seats behind that. We understand the Trump family will be sitting there. And then look at this over here. This is really interesting. There's a desk with a chair and a microphone, and we believe this is where he's going to be signing a lot of those executive orders, anywhere from 50 to 100 executive orders that span a variety of issues, from restructuring government to opening up drilling fields to cracking down on illegal immigration. I want to show you the crowd as well. These people are the diehards. They're people with tickets, but they're also people that waited outside in those freezing conditions to get in here. And I got to tell you, they're going to be here for 10 hours plus before they even get their eyes on the president once he comes in here, because we're not expecting him until later in the day. Lots of music. I'm sure a very long Trump speech as well once he comes out of that the rotunda and gets over here to the rally. So people here excited, waiting on the president. It does have sort of that party atmosphere. Luckily, they're not serving beer, so the people here are going to be here for about 10 hours. They do have concessions, things like that, but they're going to be patient and they're watching. Actually, I'm going to ask my photographer, Ray Farmer, to show up here. They're watching it all live on the Jumbotron. We should show you that. So all the action that our viewers at NBC are seeing, they're actually also seeing here as well, live in real time. When the president-elect got to the White House and met President Biden, the place erupted in cheers. There's been no booing. It's been all sort of very happy and festive, not anything ugly or nasty. So it looks like people are celebrating the incoming president, the 47th president of the United States. Guys, I'm going to send it back over to you.
All right, Tom, thank you. I want to check in with our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, who's with us now. And it's been a momentous morning already with President Biden's, in his final hours in office, issuing a slew of pardons and already controversial.
We right now, Savannah, are right in the middle of what is one of the most enduring transfer of power rituals, of course. The greeting on the North Portico, the tea behind closed doors. Just speaking to someone inside the West Wing, I'm told that they are sharing that tea right now in the Blue Room within the residence of the White House here. And then, of course, they will gather together and drive. We can see only a short distance behind me. The Beast, the presidential limousine, has pulled up. It's near the North Portico as well, where it will take, as expected, both President Biden and incoming President Trump together back up to the Capitol. You spoke a little bit about those pardons. This is going to be a conversation that could be interesting at times behind closed doors. They shared about 2 hours together when Joe Biden greeted and hosted Donald Trump here immediately after his defeat of Kamala Harris. But this time, as we've noted, Donald Trump only moments before arriving to see the president describe these preemptive pardons as disgraceful. Now the two are face-to-face behind closed doors. Among those receiving those pardons today, some of the members of the January 6th committee, including Liz Cheney, who the president himself has blamed for egregious crimes in the past. Donald Trump has done that. Mark Milley, Anthony Fauci, and some of those Capitol Hill and D.C. police who were involved in testimony testifying before that committee. Donald Trump not holding back his frustration, his anger about that, insisting that they have committed crimes and telling our colleague Kristen Welker in the past that they should be jailed. So with that as the early headline of the day, the transfer of power begins in earnest. Again, earlier I was inside the West Wing and you could already see the movement behind closed doors. The press secretary's office largely cleared out, absent in one of the adjacent offices a giant stand-up cardboard cutout of Joe Biden. Doubtful that will last very long with the new team. The photo frames that are hung within the West Wing had photos of Joe Biden last evening. This morning, they are empty in anticipation they will be filled with new photos of Donald Trump. It's notable one interesting change as it relates to those photos. In the past, Savannah, as you know, formerly working at the White House, my colleagues Kristen and Hallie know as well, those frames had been black frames. When Donald Trump arrived, he replaced them with gold-plated frames remain through the Biden years, and it's likely that Donald Trump will keep it that way.
All right. We're starting to see, thank you, Peter. We're starting to see the processional, some of the dignitaries coming into the rotunda, including, as mentioned before, former speakers of the House, Newt Gingrich, John Boehner, Kevin McCarthy. Yep, there he is, spotted. And there will be several current and former leaders and officials who got that coveted hot ticket, and it is hot, at least warm, inside the rotunda. Marked difference of what they had probably planned for when we thought it would be out, on, as tradition has it, on the west front of the Capitol.
Saw Mitch McConnell, a former Republican Senate leader, walking by a moment ago as they take the place. You're right, these are the seats that everyone wants, and there are only so many of them. The direct viewing of the inauguration now just a few hours away. Let's bring in our senior White House correspondent, Garrett Haake. He is also on Capitol Hill. Garrett, good morning.
Lester, good morning. And yeah, those seats in the rotunda got a lot hotter Friday afternoon when Donald Trump announced via social media that this entire ceremony, the part of it actually prescribed by the Constitution, would be moving indoors into the rotunda for the first time in 40 years. I'm glad you mentioned Mitch McConnell, because the fact that the now former Republican leader, who's become something of a Trump antagonist ever since January 6th, got one of those seats inside the rotunda is noteworthy. Up here on Capitol Hill and with Hill aides over the last couple days, there's been a scramble to figure out exactly who's going to be where for this ceremony today. They can only fit about 600 people inside the rotunda, another 1,300 or so down in Emancipation Hall where Tom is, but you figure all of the current lawmakers, former lawmakers, their spouses, governors, major donors, even leaders of some of the major industries in this country, including the tech moguls who have kind of surrounded Donald Trump in recent days. The committee that runs the inauguration and Trump's team having to scramble to find places for everyone for these moments here in the Capitol. They've also been reworking some of the choreography a little bit. You're looking now, I think, at the East Front here, where Donald Trump's motorcade will eventually arrive. Crews have been in the Capitol all weekend long, hanging lights in hallways, trying to make sure that every step of his journey through the Capitol and into that rotunda is captured for history. The swearing in itself will take place at 11:47 a.m. That's an important time. The 47 minutes meant to symbolize Trump as the 47th president, and then he's expected to get right to work. He will not wait until he gets to the Capital One Arena to start signing some of those executive orders we've been talking about. He's expected to do some of that work moments after getting sworn in here. Sort of a theme of moving quickly was present throughout his campaign, but his Republican allies up here on Capitol Hill very aware of the fact that they've got small majorities in both houses. He's going to be a term-limited president, and they're going to have to move very quickly. And that means starting today, before he even leaves this building, and putting his agenda into place if they want to get all the things they've promised actually done.
Well, Garrett, they are moving quite quickly. And by the way, we're watching these arrivals into the Capitol, and we've seen, of course, we just saw Bill and Hillary Clinton. We've seen some of the tech CEOs. Tim Cook of Apple just walked in. Jeff Bezos of Amazon and his betrothed, Lauren Sanchez. And talk about moving quickly. I want to turn to Hallie Jackson here, because this just was broken by Caroline Leavitt, who's going to be the incoming spokesperson for Trump, with a big change right here. Go ahead, Hallie. I'll let you break that news.
She just confirmed to us, too, that one of the day one executive actions that President-elect Trump will take is renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and renaming Denali in Alaska, of course, Mount McKinley. Now,
its former name.
Exactly. Remember, former President Obama renamed it in 2015 Denali. There's some question marks and some caveats here. First, on the Gulf of Mexico, international waters, not clear he does have the authority to rename it. On Denali and Mount McKinley, listen, remember, McKinley was an expansionist president, which perhaps fits with some of the things that Donald Trump has said that he wants to do when he talks about things like Greenland and the Panama Canal.
Well, if President Obama could change McKinley to Denali,
right.
I suppose Trump can say, I could change it back.
There are. Let's check in with the Alaska delegation to see how they feel about it. Senator Lisa Murkowski, for example, who would be opposed, previously had suggested to renaming it. But this is an example of the way that Donald Trump is coming into office looking to flex that muscle, looking to show that he is putting his stamp on government and that he is a force to be reckoned with here.
Yeah, we're seeing, there's Vivek Ramaswamy, who, of course, will be says he's going to run for governor, but until then, going to be part of this government efficiency effort that he was supposed to co-lead with Elon Musk. And we see current and former members of Congress,
Democrats and Republicans.
Steny and Hoyer. I mean, this is this in Washington. If you're a nerd like all of us at this table, it's just a real who's who. It's like, I guess this is how some people feel at the Academy Awards,
this is our Oscar.
spotting celebrities, but we start to see them file in here all under one roof.
Kristen, another executive order regarding diversity initiatives.
Absolutely. A couple of them. The first one that we're told President-elect Trump is going to sign today is going to make it federal law that there are two sexes, male and female, and will seek to end federal funding or recognition of gender identities. The second one targeted DEI initiatives. It aims to end any federal funding for DEI initiatives. Why is this significant? First of all, politically speaking, these are not his most popular positions and issues. Americans are sharply divided on this, sharply divided over whether DEI initiatives should be cut, sharply divided over whether the government is striking the right balance.
The DEI, just diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Savannah. Very good point.
Well, just those efforts to make a more equitable workplace, but they've become controversial.
These aren't the issues that necessarily got him elected. It was the economy, it was inflation, it was immigration.
They were a part of his stump speech, certainly. They were a part of this cultural campaign that he ran, but you're right. His biggest issues were the border and the economy. But these are issues that also help to energize his base. But again, nationally speaking, there are sharp divides around these issues. I think the thing when we zoom out and think about all of these executive orders and executive actions that he's going to be signing today, what we can also anticipate are a series of legal challenges. So he's going to be signing these executive orders, and then as soon as that pen dries and the ink dries, maybe even sooner, you can bet that you're going to have some activist group come and challenge them and challenge them.
There are a lot of executive orders. Most escape our attention on a day in and day out basis.
Absolutely. And this, by the way, this is a part of the tradition of a president's first day in office. But this day is going to be different because, remember, on President Trump's first day in office, the first time he was elected, he signed one executive order.
Well, and also,
today,
these aren't
like more than 100.
These aren't some marginal aspect of federal law. I mean, he is talking about signing an executive order that would end recognition for birthright citizenship, which is a protection in the United States Constitution. And to Kristen's point, no sooner will he sign it than perhaps somebody will be, going Shift F7 to print the lawsuit that will challenge it. And
But it will play well among.
Of course, so much of this is symbolic. He's trying to send a message. There's a new sheriff in town.
If you play that out, though, these lawsuits, these legal challenges, if they do make it all the way up to the Supreme Court, look at what Donald Trump has done to the Supreme Court. To my eye, I haven't seen the justices yet. We will see, of course, the Chief Justice, members of the Supreme Court, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, for example, swearing in incoming Vice President J.D. Vance. Remember, Donald Trump put 3 of those, essentially, on the Supreme Court, tilting the balance of power in that court. We have already seen rulings that are broadly seen as more favorable to the incoming president here. So when you talk about legal challenges, that has to be a part of the conversation as well.
All right, we want to go to NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. He's outside on the east front of the Capitol as we see Doug Emhoff start walking out.
And Chavan's walking out of the front of the White House, too. So it looks like the tea is over and they're starting to depart. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Savannah and Lester, and yes, I'm standing right by where you are seeing folks enter into the Capitol here on the East Front. We've seen 3 former presidents come in already, former President Barack Obama, former President George W. Bush, and former President Bill Clinton, who was, of course, accompanied by his wife, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who lost to Donald Trump in the 2016 election. She got out of the car right next to where I'm standing, looked at all of us, said hello, and said, "It is a bright, sunny day." Had a big big smile on her face as she walked in from the East Front into the Capitol. Just a large number of dignitaries that have been walking in over the past few minutes. You mentioned that many of the incoming cabinet secretaries who still need to be confirmed have walked in through this area. Also, a large group of those tech titans all together, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Mark Zuckerberg, all walking together in a group with their significant others into the Capitol to be a part of this event. We just saw Rudy Giuliani. We saw members of the Supreme Court as well. So there is a large group coming into the building right now to be a part of this. Of course, it is such a small number of people that actually get to be inside the Capitol. For many years, the actual swearing in of the president was done here where I'm standing on the East Front. There have been 55 presidents that have been sworn in at the United States Capitol. And up until 1981, when Ronald Reagan moved it to the West Front of the Capitol, the other side from where I'm standing, almost all of them were inaugurated in this space. Of course, there was a blizzard back in 1909 when there was an inauguration there. They were forced to move inside the Capitol, much like what we're seeing take place here. That happened in the old Senate chamber, where that inauguration took place. And then, of course, in 1985, when Ronald Reagan was dealing with cold weather, he too moved his inauguration inside in the rotunda, which is where this inauguration is going to take place today. This is only the second time that an inauguration has taken place inside the Capitol Rotunda. It is obviously a cold day in Washington. That's part of the reason that everything was moved inside, but I don't think it's nearly as cold as what we thought it was going to be. The temperatures are in the 20s. There is a bright, sunny sky, and the biggest complication probably is the wind, which kicks up from time to time. And then that sends the wind chill down, which does make it uncomfortable. But I don't think it's nearly as cold as what they were thinking. And you have to wonder whether or not this could have happened outside, given the fact that it's not as cold as they once thought. Regardless, the decision was made, and now the situation is all moved inside. And so far, it seems to be a very smooth process. Obviously, security concerns are very great right now. There is still fencing all around the Capitol complex, just an enormous law enforcement present all throughout Washington, D.C. And then while this takes place here in two separate parts of the Capitol, you have the swearing in that will take place inside the rotunda, but then there's an overflow room that takes place in Emancipation Hall, which is underground, separate from the actual Capitol building itself. And then there's also that massive event that's going to take place at Capital One Arena, where 20,000 people will watch the festivities there. And then that will take the place of the inaugural parade, of course, when all that takes place here in the next few hours. So we are now awaiting the president and the incoming president to arrive here at the Capitol. It's interesting, they will arrive by car. The first time that we saw a president arrive here by car was back in 1921. So that is obviously the tradition now, as they'll make their way down Pennsylvania Avenue here to the Capitol and then enter in the same area that we're standing right now. And then after the event takes place, after Donald Trump is sworn into office, we'll then see Joe Biden and Joe Biden leave the Capitol for the last time. And that's where we have Marine One that's parked out on the East Front right now. That will take Joe Biden to Joint Base Andrews, where he will then take the plane that looks like Air Force One. It won't be Air Force One anymore for his final trip out of Washington, where he is going to spend some time in California. So that will be a remarkable moment. That, in many ways, demonstrates that peaceful transfer of power as you see Joe Biden leave here, get on Marine One, and then head to his private life. You have to remember, of course, 4 years ago, Donald Trump did not take part in that effort. When he lost the election in 2020, he refused to take part in any of the inaugural activities, was not here for Joe Biden's swearing in. So it was then Vice President Mike Pence who left the Capitol all on his own. He left by car, and then that was where the peaceful transfer of power essentially took place. So a lot of differences with this particular inauguration on many fronts. You have the weather complications and everything else that is related to that. But so far, it seems smooth sailing as this inauguration moves forward. Savannah and Lester.
Thank you, Ryan. That sets the stage. I want to get right to our Chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, who's got some news for us this morning. Tell us, Peter, what do you got?
Savannah, learning a little more details about that first conversation between President Joe Biden and incoming President Trump as the Bidens greeted the Trumps only a short time ago outside the North Portico. Behind me, Joe Biden's message to Donald Trump was, "Welcome home." And only moments before that, before the Trumps arrived, the reporters had a chance to shout some questions, and we're just now learning some of the answers that we heard from the president. Among others, President Biden was asked if he wrote a letter to Donald Trump. He says the answer to that is yes. By tradition, that letter is often put in the top drawer of the Resolute desk. Donald Trump doing the same for Joe Biden 4 years ago. President Biden, was also asked what he said in that letter. He said that's between Trump and me. And then he was asked a question about what his message was on this day. He said joy, and then he said hope. There's the First Lady and the incoming First Lady, Melania Trump, who are right now entering the presidential limousine.
Yeah, so the tea is over. Peter, thank you so much. The First Ladies will ride together. The President-elect and current President will ride over together by tradition. As mentioned, a tradition that was not honored 4 years ago by Donald Trump, but an extraordinarily gracious welcome by President Biden and saying, welcome home to President Trump. Kelly O'Donnell joins us. I want to bring you into this conversation. I mean, it's just, it's so interesting because we have these acrimonious campaigns, and certainly this one fit that bill. And yet these are the moments that I think so many Americans really treasure, this idea that on this day we can set aside for the moment that partisanship and take part in the peaceful transfer of power and those traditions and those rituals. And it's clear that President Biden is, regardless of how he may have experienced his own transition 4 years ago, he will afford those courtesies to this president.
And I think he wants the public to take a cue from that. If he can do this after all the things we heard him say publicly about the threat to democracy that he believes Donald Trump is, about the rough and tumble times of campaign life, if he can extend these courtesies, if he can say there is joy and hope in a new beginning, then the country can. And that is not just for Donald Trump. That is for world stability. That is for the importance of what these traditions mean. And so a lot of what happens today seems like it is the trappings of Washington. The underpinnings are very much the part of trying to understand what is the impact of all of this.
We just saw Susie Wiles, who is the
incoming
chief of staff.
The first woman.
Yes, incoming chief of staff at the White House and one of the key architects of Trump's re-election victory and political comeback. And we're continuing to watch some of these images unfold.
Yeah, we are going to see again the President Biden and President Trump make their way together in that vehicle. Over history, there have been some odd moments, which Kelly could certainly talk about. But during the Carter-Reagan transition, we're told, according to Carter's chief of staff or communications director at the time, that there was kind of a awkwardness and that Jimmy Carter was consumed by the Iran hostage crisis. At the same time, Ronald Reagan reportedly was telling jokes about his Hollywood days. Here's incoming Vice President Vance now heading into the vehicle.
With Kamala Harris, whom he defeated, of course, at the top of the ticket.
And to people watching, to Kelly's point, to what Lester is talking about here, there may be, to some, a bit of a cognitive dissonance here, because it is a hard left turn from the days of the campaign. When you look at this image of these two together, the bitterest of rivals here. Remember how Democrats framed this campaign? It was as an existential threat to the foundations of democracy. They framed this as foundational. The argument goes, and I'm paraphrasing.
Well, both sides framed it as foundational.
Exactly. And the argument goes, the other side isn't just they don't just have bad ideas, they're bad people. And now here we are at this moment where Joe Biden, the outgoing president, is, as Kelly says, looking to really make the point that the institution prevails, the institution upholds, despite what we saw 4 years ago when there were some serious questions about whether that would be the case.
And when you talk about Jimmy Carter, Lester, you do, I think, raise an important point, which is how will President Biden be remembered? And here's, of course, House Speaker Mike Johnson, we are seeing walk in.
Something about executive orders,
Yes.
a lot. Not breaking news there.
That was not breaking news, but interesting to hear
It will be a lot. How
this
many?
day. But it is interesting to think about that transition between Carter and Reagan. You're right, that came after such a hard-fought battle, and the parallels are extraordinary. We just laid former President Jimmy Carter to rest, and one of the themes was that his presidency was remembered in a more favorable light than when he left
With
office.
time.
Yes, with time. And President Biden trying to write the first draft of how his presidency will be remembered, but beset by some of the same issues: high inflation, hostages being held overseas.
And when you mention hostages, Kristen, one of the key things on that inauguration day is it was an active situation.
Yes.
And Jimmy Carter was able to announce to the country at the inaugural that they had moved out of Iranian airspace. And so it was not an ordinary handing off day. He was in the middle of trying to handle a crisis. There was great friction because there was a perception that the Reagan team had had a hand in it not happening. And so what we saw unfolding with what happened with Israel and Hamas was that note of history was guiding some of the strategic and tactical decisions they made by having the two teams work together. We saw, of course, some initial hostages released. President Biden was able, in his own way, to announce that. President Trump doing his own thing, taking his own credit. So that is a guide for the kind of ways that this can happen. Also, Carter and Reagan didn't really know each other very well, but any Reagan comparison that happens today is a plus to Donald Trump. The first time that I worked with him on the road, on the trail, back in 2015, he had placards of a photo of himself with Ronald Reagan. He wanted that at the earliest moment to be a comparison for Republicans. Now that's a decade ago and a lot of miles ago. But these comparisons today to Reagan having his ceremony inside, these two men had a lot of the showman parts of the presidency in common, although politically quite different. Ronald Reagan would not be in the MAGA camp, the Reagan we knew then. So threads of those other presidents do cast a shadow on a day like this.
This moment here will certainly emphasize the idea of unity. This is our first opportunity to see a unifying moment here during this transition today. But you have to wonder, going back to the Republican convention, remember there was talk about unity, and then before long in the Trump speech, he was beginning to fall into his rally type presentation.
All three of us have covered this incoming president and outgoing president for many, many years. And one of the themes in my time at the White House was that you'd often hear from aides and advisors that the president may strike Donald Trump being a certain tone, right? A tone that is unifying. After his assassination attempt, which remember came just the Republican National Convention this summer, the difference was that Donald Trump himself said publicly that he felt like he had been changed, that he wanted to deliver a speech that would bring both sides together. The speech that we saw that week was not that. So the White House says, and incoming administration officials say, and I was told this will be a speech today that is about restoring and renewing confidence.
Here come the presidents.
Throw a couple questions in the direction of the incoming president and the outgoing president, but no dice, not this
My
morning.
guess is they'll have a lot to talk about. It's a short ride.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall inside that
Well,
vehicle.
remember we just saw at the Carter funeral, it was President Obama, and Trump were quite chatty. So it's not a long ride; it's a 5-6 minute ride. But it sounds like, based on Peter's reporting, that it has been a warm embrace and exchange this morning in reverence of the office and tradition. And now they'll, as tradition has it, ride in this motorcade, the short drive to the Capitol, where the swearing in will start to be underway.
Joe Biden has talked about recently about whether he thinks he could have beaten, Donald Trump in the election. He thinks maybe he still believes he could have, and you have to wonder what's going through his mind at this point.
But he also says in the next breath, when asked if he could have the vigor to serve for 4 more years, said he didn't know. And you get the sense
He said it more colorfully than that. He said, who the hell knows?
You get the sense watching him here, this is not, and I think you know this is not a person who wants to be leaving the White House. He wanted 4 more years. He did. And his wife, the First Lady, wanted 4 more years, as she has talked about. She believed that her husband could do it. She's been one of his staunchest defenders all along, which is why the dynamics with Joe Biden are fascinating here.
And Kelly might get to pull rank as the longest serving, having covered Capitol Hill, and Joe Biden for the longest. And I think you would agree that he had wanted to be president for pretty much the entirety of his 50-year career in public service.
And once you attain that office, it's hard to believe it. It's hard to ever see yourself as not being capable of continuing, and I think that has influenced a lot of what we've seen publicly, that his own belief, whether polling or the views of the country support that or not. He will always be the 46th president of the United States, and so that he hangs on to. Donald Trump is also someone who has a hospitality business, so he has no trouble making small talk and no trouble going through these ceremonies. He's quite at ease.
And Joe Biden likes to tell a story as well.
Oh, indeed he does. I do think that his decision, the timing of when he decided to pass the baton to Vice President Kamala Harris, will be a part of his legacy. It will be a part of how history grapples with how Joe Biden is remembered. He promised, he campaigned on being a transitional president, and when that moment came, bolstered by big wins in the primaries, he did not pass the baton.
Well, that's one thing we haven't really focused as much on, which is what do the Democrats do now? We just saw that the Democrat Hakeem Jeffries and to the Capitol, but this is a moment in a time of soul searching for Democrats. At the first Trump administration, there was a lot of talk about the hashtag resistance, and you just don't see that same emphasis so far. What are you hearing, Kristen, about the strategy on the part of Democrats who were handed a resounding defeat at the polls?
It's a very different strategy, Savannah, for that reason. The signals, I interviewed House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries just this weekend. He said they are going to be looking for common ground with President-elect Donald Trump, particularly on issues that relate to the economy, to lowering prices. At the same time, he said we're not going to shy away from disagreeing when we feel it's necessary. But they are in a moment of soul searching. Remember, after former President Obama won his second term, Republicans were in the wilderness. And from that wilderness rose Donald Trump. So you are absolutely right to be focused on the Democrats right now as well, because politically speaking, what we are about to witness over these next 4 years will be some type of, and we'll have to see where it ends, a new leadership. And no one can answer that question. Who's the leader of the Democratic Party?
Let me just point out this picture as the outgoing and incoming president make their way to the Capitol. There are people along this route here. You'll see, and some of them appear to be in uniform, perhaps traffic directors, but there are people in this area that was going to be part of the parade later on. They still have the barricades up. We've seen a lot of people here in Washington, D.C. Who walking around who don't appear to have appointments or things that they necessarily signed up for, but those who are lucky enough to be along this path might catch it.
It's supposed to be a parade route that's much different than what was expected, but we've got a few diehards who decided, we'll bundle up with the hand warmers on and get it.
You can hear some of the cheers as they go by.
To this point about what Democrats do next and what this looks like here in a Trump administration, where, as you have noted throughout the morning, throughout the day, Savannah, the Republicans control the levers of power in that branch. Remember that Republicans have the narrowest House majority in modern political history, right? They don't have 60 million seats to deal with here, right? And when you look at some of the numbers here, there are 3 Republicans in districts won by Democrats in the election, 4 times as many Democrats in districts won by Donald Trump, which is to say that there is in some ways for some of these Democrats an incentive to try to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans here. You're already seeing it from, for example, Pennsylvania Democrat John Fetterman, who has already said he would back at least some of the incoming president's cabinet picks, like incoming potential Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And so I think the dynamic is going to be really interesting given these close margins. Speaker Johnson doesn't have a whole lot of extra Republicans, so to speak.
They have a 1 seat.
They can't pass the legislation without Democrats in many instances.
But it's interesting because just take a step back. I mean, it is worth noting that right now, as soon as this swearing in takes place, Donald Trump, the Republicans will have the White House, both houses of Congress, as we observed before. He also has a conservative ideological majority on the Supreme Court. So it's a Republican-controlled Washington right now. But American voters also tend to keep their elected officials on a very tight leash. And at the midterms, how many times, Kelly, as Capitol Hill correspondent, you would see that at the midterms you see the House that controls the party that controls the White House lose seats. So everyone knows in Washington they're on a tight leash and a short clock, and that's why you see that urgency.
The midterms always feel so close at this particular moment. You're inaugurating a president at the same time the midterms are hovering so close.
And whatever honeymoon Donald Trump has in this moment, it is with the knowledge that the clock is ticking. He only has one term. He has less than a term based on what you just described. And if he is going to accomplish all the things he said, he's got to act quickly. And he's got to do it when he has the level of control and influence on other Republicans and to some degree on Democrats, because winning every battleground state and the popular vote does send a message.
Where will Democrats dig in?
Certainly, it will be some of the issues that relate to unwinding programs that certainly existed during the Biden time, but also challenges to their core constituencies. They would want to see things like protections for workers and the environment. Those would be key areas. Concerns about the negative effects that could come from the immigration policies of President Trump. There will be many who say securing the border is a needed priority, but what are the unforeseen problems that result from that?
Are Democrats hoping and thinking that there will be an overreach, that this notion of a mandate that perhaps Donald Trump will take too far? Is that kind of the strategy?
Absolutely, particularly on the border, I would say. That's an area where you could see some robust debate and oversight. Don't forget oversight. I think that's going to be significant as well. It's worth thinking about in this moment the agenda of President-elect Trump. He wants to do something big on the border. He wants to do something big on taxes. I won't get into the process. I promise you that. But
You've got 4 years to talk about it. I'll meet the press.
But how does he get it done? And that's when we look at Speaker Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who you spoke to earlier today, Savannah. They become so significant. How do these men work together?
Well, this is an incredible shot, this motorcade, and we have the advantage of a camera and a truck watching the whole thing. There's these wheels rolling, and they're just a few moments away now from the Capitol, and the swearing-in ceremony will get underway in earnest. I want to go to Craig Melvin, my colleague who's over at Emancipation Hall. This is a first for this venue for inauguration, and it's by necessity. The cold, of course, having moved everything indoors, and that makes this the overflow room. So, Craig, as we watch these images, is it still that party atmosphere that you were describing earlier?
Oh, very much so indeed, Savannah. Moments away from, again, to your point, that caravan arriving here at the Capitol. Just to give you a sense of where we are and what we can expect. We're talking about 2,600 people. That's it. That's the number of people who are going to be able to watch President Trump be sworn in here just moments from now. You're going to have roughly 800 there in the rotunda. You'll have another 1,300 underground where we are in Emancipation Hall, and then roughly 500 more next door in this theater here at the Capitol Visitor Center. Upstairs in the rotunda, think of that as sort of the adult table at Thanksgiving, where we are down below. Sort of, it's like the kids' table to a certain extent. Upstairs, you've got elected members of Congress, you've got members of the military, you've got congressional leadership. Down here, it's like a Star Wars bar to a certain extent. In the last few minutes, I've seen Jake Paul, his brother Logan Paul, pro wrestler, pro boxer. We've seen New York City Mayor Eric Adams as well. He's down here. So is Matt Schlapp, the former White House political director. The Commandant of the Marine Corps also here as well, a man named Eric Smith. So they are still milling about here. They're about to start taking their seats. They have been watching the same images that we're seeing right now. They're watching them unfold on two giant jumbotrons here at Emancipation Hall as well.
All right, Craig, thank you. I want to go back to Ryan Nobles. He's outside the east front of the Capitol where the arrival is taking place. Right?
Yeah, that's right, Lester. Yep, we just saw the motorcade pull up here on the east front, and we're now watching as the two presidents start to exit the presidential vehicles, and they'll walk into the Capitol. There's an enormous security presence around them. Probably about 10 or 12 vehicles accompany them up the Capitol Hill to the Capitol, where they will walk into the building. Now we can see Jill Biden being escorted out from her car. And this will begin the process in earnest. We can see Melania Trump being escorted in as well. it looks as though the two presidents, they're actually underneath the carriage entrance, which is the way that you get into the Senate side of the Capitol. It looks as though the presidential limousine, known colloquially as the Beast, is parked inside that carriage entrance. So they're not out in the opening here on the east front where I'm standing. They'll come in there through the carriage entrance into the first floor of the Capitol and then make their way up into the rotunda. So we actually can't see a glimpse of them getting out of the presidential limousine at the moment. Now, yeah, we can see them now walking into the Capitol from the carriage entrance here. Those are the two Sergeant-at-Arms, the Senate and the House Sergeant-at-Arms, who are escorting them. You see Amy Klobuchar, who is the chair of the Rules Committee of the Senate. She and her committee were in charge of all the inaugural festivities and the planning of this massive event. They were also responsible for the quick adjustment in order to do everything inside. Trailing the two presidents, you see, of course, the Vice President, Kamala Harris. Also, the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer. And they will now make their way up to the rotunda. From where they are right now on the first floor of the Capitol, they'll have to go up one flight of stairs, and then it is probably about a 3-minute walk to get into the rotunda for this event. So pretty seamless.
Elon Musk.
Yep, Elon Musk there. We saw him come in with a number of the tech executives. So they are safely inside the Capitol, Lester, preparing for the next stage of this swearing-in process.
And we just saw Melania Trump enter as well, so we're getting close to the moment, the inaugural. There's Doug Emhoff, the outgoing second gentleman, and we'll continue to watch these arrivals. I want to go to Garrett Haake, also on Capitol Hill for us, with some news this morning about Vivek Ramaswamy. We just saw it mentioned that he's indicated. There's J.D. Vance, our incoming Vice President, and his wife, Usha Vance. But anyway, Garrett, you have some information about Vivek Ramaswamy and his plans.
Yeah, Savannah, Vivek Ramaswamy has an interesting distinction here as someone who will be departing an administration and a post that didn't actually exist yet before he departs it. We have now reporting from two sources familiar with his plans that Vivek Ramaswamy, who was set to be the co-leader of DOGE, this new Department of Government Efficiency that the Trump administration is expected to set up in the coming hours, will in fact not be really taking on that role. He's instead going to run for governor of Ohio. That had been sort of widely rumored. We now have it confirmed that he's expected to make that announcement next week, and that it was impossible for him to do both things at the same time. We just saw Elon Musk in the rotunda. Musk is, of course, the other co-leader of DOGE, who, again, is a very complex and important figure in Trump world. He has no formal role. DOGE itself is something of an outside consultancy. It's not clear how much authority they will have. But nevertheless, Musk, with all of his entanglements with the federal government, particularly in the form of SpaceX, his rocket company, which has billions of dollars in contracts with the government, will now be in charge of finding, he says, $2 trillion in cuts to the federal budget. Now, in recent weeks, he's walked that number back, suggesting that a more realistic goal might be $1 trillion. But Musk and the team that they have put in place in some of these agencies will now be moving forward without the services of fellow entrepreneur and tech executive Vivek Ramaswamy, instead setting his sights on governor of Ohio.
We understand the crowds are erupted who were down at Emancipation Hall, the spillover area, if you will, when they saw the picture of the two presidents.
And we're seeing members of his cabinet, if they are confirmed entering. We saw Pete Hegseth walk in a few moments ago. There's Christine Noem, several members of the incoming administration who are awaiting a Senate hearing. We had Senator Thune on, who's the majority leader in the Senate, who said he thought that all of these nominees have a path, which is Washington speak. But he's saying something with, he's saying they have a path. It doesn't mean they have the votes.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
In that moment, I'm so glad you brought it up. I was just about to say it because it struck me watching that interview with Senator Thune, because he was asked pretty directly, can they get confirmed? And he kind of paused and then said that line. What does that mean? It means we're looking at some of the more controversial people who are yet to be confirmed. You look at somebody like Pete Hegseth, for example. He had his confirmation hearing. It seems like he is on track to get the votes, the Republican votes that he needs.
For the Defense Department.
Exactly, to serve as the head of the Pentagon. But remember what happened happened with Matt Gaetz, the person who Donald Trump initially selected to serve as his incoming attorney general. You saw Senate Republicans flex that advise and consent muscle and make clear to Donald Trump that Matt Gaetz was not going to fly, that he would not have the backing. So as you take a look, I mean, there's Marco Rubio, selected to serve as the incoming Secretary of State. That's going to be another very fascinating confirmation hearing. He's right there alongside, I believe that's Senator Pichai. You see some others there as well. There's Pete Hegseth in the back, Pam Bondi, Doug Burgum. You talk about this sort of team of rivals. Several of the folks who are standing there are, in fact, Vivek Ramaswamy, former rivals in that presidential primary as well.
And one of the things we'll expect to see is when we talk about the new president signing many things today, among the things I would anticipate he would sign is the actual nomination for these cabinet members. We talk about them as nominees. They can't be nominees until he has the power of the presidency. That comes at noon. And in the flurry of those early events, I would expect he would sign those formal nominations, which then allows the Congress to move on some of those where they've completed the process. And so we could get votes as early as today.
And they appear to be leaning toward national security posts.
Absolutely. They're leaning toward, for example, Senator Marco Rubio, who has been picked to serve as Secretary of State. He, in his confirmation hearing, had broad bipartisan
Former Vice President Dan Quayle and his wife Marilyn entering. We're going to see all the living presidents here today.
But not everyone. We won't. All of the living presidents. We won't see former First Lady Michelle Obama, and that has certainly gotten some attention. Though we will, of course, see former President Barack Obama.
She missed President Carter's funeral last week as well, so she's clearly downshifting from Washington.
I think Dick Cheney also, for reasons of age and wellness, is opting out. In addition to the obvious political overtones that he did not support Donald Trump.
His daughter pardoned today by President Biden,
and a new statement from her, Savannah, just in, and literally the last 30 seconds from both her and Congressman Benny Thompson, of course, who helmed that, or were part of that bipartisan select committee on the January 6th attack, receiving those pardons from President Biden on his way out the door. And they say in the statement, we have been pardoned today, not for breaking the law, but for upholding it. Some of the first reaction that we are now getting from Liz Cheney and some of those others.
As we keep our eyes on the Capitol Rotunda, where the swearing in will take place, first of the Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance, and then of the President before noon, as tradition holds it. We want to continue to watch these pictures as they come in. There's Vice President Pence, former Vice President Pence, who, of course, served by Trump's side in the first term and did not endorse him for this next run for the presidency, and, of course, will not be joining as his vice president, but will be here at the inaugural. He walks in alone.
One of the most notable people to watch today, because under any other circumstances, he would have joined the president he served for another term.
Well, they had that moment just a few weeks ago at the Carter
their first time seeing each other.
And I think we all kind of held our breath as they came in contact with each other, but they shared a handshake and apparently some polite greetings.
Polite, yes.
I think of former Vice President Mike Pence in the same light as I think of President Biden. These are institutionalists. These are people who take these traditions very seriously. They think that they are inextricable with this democracy.
Well, and it must be said that in this rotunda 4 years ago, on January 6th, this very rotunda where they are all standing now was overrun by protesters, some of them with the words "Hang Mike Pence" on their lips. And it'll be interesting to see if one of the actions we see the incoming president take today are pardons of those who were convicted in connection with January 6th. He has said so as recently as yesterday, that he believes his supporters will be very pleased with the decisions he makes there. J.D. Vance has said those who were convicted of violence may not be pardoned. We'll see what actually happens.
And here are some of the most powerful people in the world, the tech titans, as we often refer to them. Jeff Bezos with his back to us, I believe. He was greeting Elon Musk.
Senator Pichai, there.
Mark Zuckerberg, you saw in the corner.
I do think it will be interesting to see which of the January 6th defendants are in fact pardoned. When I interviewed President-elect Trump, he said he wasn't ruling anyone out, but those comments by the incoming vice president, I think, are hugely significant and potentially a signal that the president-elect is shifting to looking at those who were not convicted of violent crimes, that he will draw the line there. Again, we'll have to wait and see what he actually
Hundreds and hundreds of names of those who have been convicted, so there is room to do quite a bit of pardoning should he choose to do so, and also to preserve the issue of violence exercised against law enforcement. If he wants to draw that line, there's a way to do it.
At least 1,500 people were charged in the events of January 6th. About 1,200 of them were convicted or pleaded guilty. Of those, just over 600 were sentenced to some sort of incarceration, ranging from just a couple of days up to 22 years. So there is a question here of how Donald Trump, if he does end up issuing these pardons as expected, will kind of slice that.
We are watching these images of the Capitol and some of the key bold-faced names that have been assembled there. We're not the only ones. Tom Yamas is at Capital One Arena just down the street. The president's supporters are gathering. It has become something of a watch party as well, Tom.
It has, and it's been interesting to kind of watch our coverage because they're putting up a live feed of the pictures you guys are seeing and seeing the reaction of all the Trump supporters here. The loudest boos so far have not been for President Biden or Vice President Harris. The loudest boos so far were for former Vice President Mike Pence when he walked in. For everything you guys were just mentioning there, it was somewhat surprising. I mean, you know he's not popular in MAGA world, but to hear the loudest boos for him says a lot about how the Republican Party, at least the Republican Party right now, a lot of them feel about Mike Pence. And it's interesting, when some of the other cabinet members came in, the ones that maybe are perceived as more controversial, like, the Secretary of Defense nominee, Pete Hegseth, they got the loudest cheers. Also, about maybe 30 minutes ago, inside the Capital One Arena, we saw a shot of former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Okay, now the boos are picking up again, as you can imagine. You have former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and obviously former President Bill Clinton as well. The crowd here is getting a little more raucous as it's filling out, about 20,000 inside of the Capital One Arena. It was pretty peaceful and friendly. It now seems to be getting a little more fired up and amped up. The boos are growing loud. I would say the booing now probably louder than it was for Vice President Mike Pence. So it's turning somewhat into I don't know if it's a sporting event here, but you're definitely getting crowd reaction in real time to the inauguration, which I will say is pretty interesting. I was making the point, Rudy Giuliani is here. As you know, he just settled a defamation suit against those two Georgia election workers to the tune of north of $100 million. They did settle for an undisclosed amount. But when he popped up on the screen, everyone started cheering. We're also getting some cheers here. Not super loud cheers, but some cheering here for former President Bush and the former First Lady Laura Bush as well as they enter. But louder cheers for the Trump family here as we see Lara Trump, the daughter-in-law, of course, and some of the Trump children as they're entering the rotunda there. So, again, pretty interesting to watch this kind of in real time and how sort of MAGA world is watching. Big boos right now, as you can imagine. I don't know if you guys can hear it over my mic, but...
Boy, is that striking.
Former President Obama. Yeah, former President Obama getting a resounding, as we would say in New York, a Bronx cheer here.
I have to wonder if this is setting the tone
but look, these are loyal supporters, yeah.
Day.
Yeah, Lester, I think you're right. It is going to set the tone for the speech tonight. I truly believe that the president will give a speech there in the rotunda, and you will come here, and it'll probably be a much different speech, a much different tone.
Sorry, we just lost our contact there for a second. Tim Cook, the Apple CEO there, but we were just remarking that this dignity event and all of the traditions and the rituals, but that focus group of rally goers and MAGA faithful who are assembled over there at the Capital One Arena did not get that memo, and they seem to be letting their feelings be known loudly, and it's got that feeling of a rally, which is interesting.
Of it all, right?
Yes, it changes the tone of the day for better or worse. We'll let our viewers at home decide, but we will see that in its full force when instead of a parade, Donald Trump proceeds over there and gives a speech. So, it's clear what they would like to hear, and he's talked about his inaugural address being one that's unifying. Perhaps he'll then change his tune when he's before, as we know, when he gets before his crowd at the rally, he likes to get going and throw some red meat. He certainly did last last night. There's Marjorie Taylor Greene, this congresswoman.
Donald Trump has always struggled with the sort of official Washington accepting him. And what we end up with, caused by the cold, a decision he announced himself, he has created a dual stream of his inauguration. All the officialdom is there, but he also has what is now a rally-style component of his most faithful, where all of the energy can pour out in the ways that we have seen, and both happening on a parallel track. In a way, losing the giant crowd has given him a way to remake this inauguration that really reflects his own style, and he's created the most elite ticket in town by not having 250,000 ticketed guests, but just about 600 in the rotunda.
All right, it is just past the top of the hour now, 11 a.m., 11:03 actually, in here in Washington, where we're just moments away from Donald Trump becoming the 47th president of the United States.
Yeah, and that's a look inside the room where it will happen. The swearing-in ceremony about to begin. This is the Capitol Rotunda. The first time we have seen an indoor inaugural in 40 years. It was called inside because of the frigid cold weather and wind chill that was forecast.
In a few minutes, the president-elect will be formally introduced. We'll see the vice president-elect, J.D. Vance, be sworn in by Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Then President-elect Trump will be sworn in for a second time by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts.
And something of a Washington mixer taking place where we see cabinet nominees mingling with tech titans and everybody waiting for the moment. 11:47 a.m. exactly. The newly sworn in President Trump will deliver his second inaugural address as the 47th president of the United States. And yes, the symbolism of that was intended.
And we wonder now what kind of speech we'll see. Will it be unlike any inauguration speech we've seen? We'll find out. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Savannah Sellers now. Savannah, we're seeing all the big names in tech in that room, the camera lingering on that remarkable picture.
Lester, that's absolutely right. It's so notable, especially when you think about the history of many of these individuals with the soon-to-be president, as well as the relationships between them. I mean, seeing them all in the same room, seemingly kind of on the same side of things here, smiling, chatting, it really is something remarkable. I mean, we just had the cameras trained on Tim Cook there. That's one that actually Trump has said. He called me. He said, Tim Cook used to call me throughout my last presidency. People wonder why he got so much done. It's because he would just call me. Of course, Apple would be majorly impacted potentially if the soon-to-be president is really to take on those tariffs with China. What does that mean for Apple and their ability to source so many of the parts that they need for many of their products? That's one of the reasons that Cook has had Trump's ear. He also was on the phone with him yesterday. We heard the soon-to-be president say at his rally yesterday. Of course, there's Elon Musk in this sort of unofficial role that we know, this Department of Government Efficiency. Obviously, a close relationship to the point where he may have some real power here in a Trump presidency, but their relationship has also sort of, it's been a roller coaster throughout time here. He ended up being the largest individual donor to Trump or to Trump causes in this election cycle, even setting up a war room in Pennsylvania, really helping on the ground to get Trump elected. Though this is after, of course, so he criticized Trump in his first presidency over climate decisions, over that travel ban. And then when we talk about just seeing some of these together, I mean, I think one of the ways to put it best is just two words between two of these men: cage fight. Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg literally wanting to fight each other, only canceled when Musk said he had some health problems that wasn't going to make it happen. Sam Altman also in that room. That's OpenAI. Musk and Sam Altman founded that company together. Musk later left, and then he sued, saying that the company put profits before humanity. So many interpersonal relationships in this room. Jeff Bezos also in that room, of course. A big target for the then president, soon to be president, as he owns the Washington Post. He has since started to make those overtures towards the soon to be president, donating $1 million to that inaugural fund, as several of these tech CEOs have done. We've also seen them all kind of make this pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago. Almost every single tech CEO in this room has done exactly that, gone there to meet with President Trump. Notably, someone that we also expect to be in this room today, outside, though I'm not sure that we've seen live pictures of him yet. Shou Chew, the CEO of TikTok. We are waiting to see exactly what a soon-to-be President Trump will do today, he says, on this matter, signing an executive order to immediately intervene on this ban that is essentially in effect, but not actually being enforced. No one's coming after the companies involved here to fine them. The Biden administration had also said that they would not take that action, though they called it a stunt that TikTok did go dark for a little over 12 hours over the weekend. And notably, the push notifications that were going out to 170 million users were name checking and saying President Trump. Of course, at the time, he's just still been the President-elect Trump, but thanking President-elect Trump, calling him President Trump, crediting him for TikTok coming back online, making that something very known. Anecdotally, I have been hearing from a lot of young people saying, I guess Trump saved TikTok. I mean, clearly a conversation between these two men. We know that Shou Chew is one of those executives who went to Mar-a-Lago. We know he presented the soon-to-be president with charts about his popularity on the app, stats that were then actually shared right over to Truth Social, almost like a copy and paste. And we heard from Trump yesterday at his rally how much he likes TikTok and how he credits it right back for how he did with young voters in this election. Part of what he credits with getting him to this day right here, getting to the White House. So certainly something we're expecting to see this afternoon.
All right, and we're also seeing the Trump sons now enter the rotunda. We saw the members of the Supreme Court as well, and how it gets me to thinking about the role the Supreme Court will continue to play in this administration.
With this 6-3 majority, remember, a third of the justices selected and ultimately confirmed under then President Trump the first time around, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett as well. The overturning of Roe versus Wade happened under that conservative majority. Limits on affirmative action, broad immunity for presidential acts as well. It is a dynamic that was so critical on the campaign trail back in 2015. I am sure that Kelly and Kristen remember you would go to these events, and one of the things you heard over and over and over again at the time was that these conservative voters wanted to see justices put in place that would uphold conservative values. And Donald Trump made that a campaign pledge, and in his first term, he delivered that. He now has the potential benefit, and again, we don't know how these justices are going to rule just because they are ideologically predisposed, under President Trump. President-elect Trump doesn't mean that that's how they will rule. All that said, it is obviously something that Donald Trump knows he has, and the Republican majorities in Congress know they have as well.
I think it's worth pausing on something that Hallie just said, which is that he is the first president to enter the Oval Office and to have been given immunity for all official acts. That is hugely significant. It was significant.
Immunity from criminal prosecution.
From criminal prosecution. It was significant because, of course, he was facing various indictments as a candidate. Those have all either gone away or have been shelved now. But it's significant because it raises questions about the extent of his power and how will we see him test that once he actually
He views the presidency as expansive, and so he will view his official acts to be broad. And among them is the opportunity to seat other justices of the Supreme Court. By virtue of being 4 years off, and now back, he could easily have 2 more, in the sense that Clarence Thomas is the longest serving and a conservative, and if he was going to choose to retire, he might do so with a Republican president. Sam Alito, I was there when he was chosen by George W. Bush. And so when you look at the potential for him to have maybe 5 justices on the court, that's extraordinary.
And Kristen, you've talked in your conversations with the president-elect. He talks about fairness. He's apparently going to talk about fairness in his speech today. What is his definition of fairness? I think that's a huge question as we enter the meat of the day.
I think that is going to be the question as we start to listen to his remarks, because he did say that fairness was going to be a theme, and then in the very next breath talked about the fact that at the same time we have to acknowledge everything that has been done that he finds to be unfair. So I'll be listening very closely to see how tempered his language is. At the same time, I've been talking to sources who say, look, he does want this to be a speech that's focused on unity, that's focused on strength. So expect a big focus on his agenda as well. I think we'll hear a lot about his perspective of restoring what he thinks will be strength to the nation. But I think, Lester, you do hit on the key question. What does fairness look like? And you go back, of course, to what we were talking about before, the speech that he gave at the convention, where he said that was a moment where he had felt changed in the wake of the assassination attempt
But an
against him.
unflattering
And it
article
turned into a rally speech.
But an unflattering article in his world can appear unfair.
As any mom of a toddler will tell you, fairness is in the eye of the beholder. So we will see what those themes mean to him when he takes the podium. Just to catch you up here, they're running a little bit behind schedule, but not terribly behind schedule. And we're expecting any moment now the announcement of the president-elect and President Biden coming in for the swearing-in ceremony to begin. The call to order will be from Senator Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat of Minnesota, who happens to be chairwoman of the Presidential Inaugural Committee. Let's listen.
Vice Presidents, the Honorable Dan Quayle, accompanied by Mrs. Marilyn Quayle, and the Honorable Michael Pence. Ladies and gentlemen, the 42nd President of the United States, the Honorable William J. Clinton, accompanied by the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton. Ladies and gentlemen, the 43rd President of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush, accompanied by Mrs. Laura Bush. Ladies and gentlemen, the 44th President of the United States, the Honorable Barack H. Obama. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Justice of the United States, the Honorable John G. Roberts, Jr., and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States.
these entries continue. We just saw a moment ago Dr. Biden and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff enter, and all of these
and Barron Trump.
Entrances will continue. We've got quite a few dignitaries to go. Barron Trump, Tiffany Trump. I've seen some of the family members who are there, who remarked on the cabinet nominees who are there, members of Congress. These are the ones who have the golden ticket today for this ceremony, traditionally held outside, that's been moved indoors today. And it's running a bit behind schedule, and the plan had been for the oath of office to take place before noon, which I believe it has to by the Constitution, and also for the speech to take place at 11:47 exactly, an homage to the fact that President Trump will be the 47th president. So we'll see whether they squish together the program a little bit in order to meet their timeline.
It's also worth talking about, and we haven't mentioned it much this morning, but the incoming Vice President, J.D. Vance, and his wife, Lucia, who are here. And he is somebody who, based on our reporting, is going to be, at least the Trump orbit hopes, the eyes and ears for the White House in the Senate, the place that he comes from, of course, leading the charge on issues like the border and immigration. These are huge, huge priorities for the incoming administration. Same when it comes to the opioid crisis, and Vance has obviously a very personal connection to that. This will be, he has talked a lot about his roots in Appalachia. He, of course, is the author of that bestseller, Hillbilly Elegies. I think a lot of folks knew him from prior to his entry into politics. And so for him, for his family, a critical moment as well here. You look at Donald Trump Jr., who is up there assembled with other family members, somebody who was a driving force based on our reporting and the folks that we've talked to in setting up J.D. Vance to be in conversations with his father, to be the vice presidential pick. And he is going to be another person who is, he's not in the toolbox, if you will, but certainly has political apparatus to try to turn some of these levers the Trump administration hopes.
Well, it's just interesting. J.D. Vance is 40 years old. He's been a United States Senator 2 years, and in a few minutes from now, he'll be literally a heartbeat away from the presidency.
It's extraordinary. And remember the reaction when he was picked. Some within the Republican Party were very nervous. They thought that then was doubling down on MAGA and the MAGA brand, and they were worried that that would alienate the types of voters that they would need to win. Ultimately, it did wind up helping them in all of the critical battleground states. And the thinking, is he in fact the future of the MAGA party, of the MAGA brand? We'll have to see how it unfolds. It's also striking to see his family there waiting for these proceedings to begin, because again, he will be entering the White House without them in the West Wing with him. Very different than his first term when Ivanka Trump or Jared Kushner were there with him.
And they were so influential in selecting Mike Pence, which is interesting. So it's still part of the family business to advise on the running.
To advise, consent, and interview candidates. Well, it's interesting, too, because you mentioned J.D. Vance, and does he have a political future? Of course, he would say yes. I believe he's already visited New Hampshire, but it also brings up the point that because of this situation, Donald Trump is a one-term president. He's twice a one-term president. He doesn't have those 8 years, so those who have political ambitions have a presidential election just a mere 4 years away.
I believe they just announced Dr. Biden.
The House of Representatives Chief Administrative Officer, the Honorable Catherine Spindor, and Mr. Bruce Fisher.
These are folks who have done yeoman's work in scrambling to move this inauguration and these proceedings indoors. You got to think their weekend was pretty frantic for sure.
Think about this a moment in contrast to what you're looking at right now. Back at the White House, there's this massive moving day underway.
There's Dr. Biden and Doug Emhoff.
One big question is what becomes of the first, second gentleman. He took great pride in carving new territory for that role. Will he go back to practicing law? Will the vice president stay in politics? One of the big questions is her future. We know that the outgoing president has the elder statesman status, but the outgoing vice president does not get an official office as guaranteed by the taxpayers. She will certainly have a political arm and will have many decisions to make about how she goes forward.
Will she run for governor of California? Will she run for president again? We know that she's going to start by writing a book.
Right.
And so she will go back to California and begin that endeavor, we are told.
And it's hard to imagine the fire's devastation would not be an issue that would draw her into a potentially visible role if she chooses to.
Absolutely. And President-elect Trump saying that he's going to visit California a little bit later on this week, and that will really be one of his first trips, if not his first trip as president.
For all of these individuals, there is a theme when you look at some of these pairings, whether it's J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, whether it's Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, whether it's some of the younger senators that we're seeing alongside some of the senators who are older in age. There is this theme in Washington over the next few years that will be generational change. The Democrats are grappling with this now. The Republicans may ultimately end up grappling with this come, and I don't want to bring up 2028 because I know we're not even there yet, but come
you owe me a call every time you bring up 2028.
Just one, I promise, Savannah. But you look at what will happen in the next 4 years here. This is something, when you talk about passing the torch, who will be the successor? When you look at Democratic leadership here, Hakeem Jeffries, of course, coming in with outgoing speaker.
At the same time, you will have Donald Trump, if he serves the complete term, will be the oldest serving president ever, even older than Biden leaving today.
And will he give room for J.D. Vance to emerge? Often presidents do not want politically ambitious vice presidents. And yet these circumstances allow for a very young man. This is the first time that a president or vice president is younger than me, so I'm having a little hard time with that today. But will he give him room to run, to set up a potential?
A lot of people have asked that about his relationship with Elon Musk. And
yes, because he's been more prominent during this period.
So far, they appear to be working together.
Donald Trump Jr. as well, I think, has alluded to his own political ambitions, and what you could see is like the next Trump dynasty, if you will.
I think it's interesting in terms of the future of all these folks we're discussing, but it's also really significant in terms of the Trump agenda. He has effectively 2 years to get everything on his very long list accomplished. And if you talk to some Republican lawmakers, they say it's even shorter than that. So the urgency is going to be there from the moment.
We're going to be doing those first 100-day stories, 100 days from now.
I've already started thinking about
And speaking of type A personalities, if you're keeping up from home, this is the moment, actually, right now, that the oath of office was to be administered to J.D. Vance by Justice Brett Kavanaugh. But as you can see, we are running a bit behind schedule.
And we don't know if those are planned holds in the program to affect the overall timing or not. But these are the people who are going to witness this swearing in with their own eyes. Well, not far in the hall below, a few thousand other people are watching as well. And then, of course, at the Capitol Arena, where we already got inklings that this may be more of a rally based on some of the reactions in the crowd to various people as they were introduced.
It's striking to see Barron Trump, just how tall he is, the fact that he is off to college, a reminder of the passage of time, how much has passed since he was last.
Kristen, you and I saw him as a 10-year-old little boy playing on the North Lawn on that first day of Trump won, and here he is, a young man.
It is remarkable.
It plays into his mother as well, of course, the incoming second-time First Lady Melania Trump, because remember, she spent a good amount of time when Barron was younger, caring for him and being involved in his life. She has now said she will be at the White House, of course, full-time. She'll make trips to Palm Beach, to New York when warranted. She intends, she says, to expand her Be Best initiative, which people may remember from that first term related to children's mental health, bullying, etc. She has also said that she feels more prepared this time around. In a recent interview, she alluded to what she described as not being prepared by the last administration for what she needed, the things that she needed to be able to enter the White House. But she says that she is ready to be there. We know that, listen, and you remember this too, I think, Kelly and Kristen, in that first Trump term, there was some discussion in the beginning of whether Melania Trump was an influence on her husband, whether she would have these conversations with him. We know the answer to that now. We know that she is right there with him on his policies, on his positions, and she wants to be holding that MAGA mantle as well.
Well, as we hold here, waiting for the next introductions to take place, let's go to Craig Melvin, my colleague. He's in Emancipation Hall, which is actually the overflow room for those who didn't score a ticket to the main event, but are able to watch from there in the Capitol. Craig, so what are you seeing and hearing? Are they able to see these images?
They are watching all of this play out just above us here. Of course, we're downstairs. Upstairs is the rotunda. They've all taken their seats. They're watching the events unfold rather on two jumbotrons. It's gotten actually pretty quiet in here. It had been a little rowdy for a while. Not quite as rowdy as it was over the arena, but it has been interesting, though, watching some of the interactions down here before the ceremony started. As you mentioned, Savannah, this is the overflow area, but I can tell you there are probably, I'd say, maybe a few dozen seats that are still empty. 1,300 is the capacity here. There are a few folks guests who didn't show up. But it's also been interesting to watch and hear the reactions to some of the introductions. President Bush was warmly welcomed here. The crowd also chuckled a little as the former president made some faces, as he has been known to do at events like this. The crowd really enjoyed that. The crowd also applauded here at Emancipation Hall when Barack Obama was announced as well. So it has been very interesting to see which reactions some of these folks got. Also interesting, some of the folks who are here. I mentioned earlier, New York City Mayor Eric Adams. We know that the mayor of New York City has had some legal issues. He was at Mar-a-Lago a short time ago. We know he met with President Trump. There's been some reporting that the mayor got an invitation yesterday and actually drove himself here. Also here, Conor McGregor, the boxer, a number of internet sensations here as well, some pro boxers, some pro wrestlers. It's been quite the gathering here downstairs, quite the motley crew of folks as we watch. First Lady Melania Trump, and as you can hear, again, quite the applause here for the soon-to-be First Lady once again. And there's Usha Vance, of course, J.D. Vance's wife, walking in front of her. But to your point, guys, at this point, we are at least 15-20 minutes behind schedule here.
All right, the crowd patiently waiting, and as Craig noted, not entirely on schedule. There will be a lot of places in the day to shrink or expand the schedule. This one, however, it needs to be on time. It needs to be before noon here on the East Coast. This is the crowd actually beneath the rotunda. And then, of course, there are scattered crowds from the people at the Capitol Arena to the people in the hall below.
And Lester, we're told today there is no what's known as the designated survivor. People may be familiar with that when it comes to a State of the Union address, where one member of the cabinet, so someone who has sworn the oath in office, stays out in case of an extraordinary threat to the continuity of government. Right now, the only people who have that oath are outgoing Biden administration officials. And we're told that there is no designated survivor today. Why? I'm not sure.
And America's tenor, Christopher D. Macchio.
Well, while we've been chatting here, I've just been looking up the 20th Amendment to make sure it does say the terms of the Vice President, the Vice President shall end at noon on the 20th day of January. So I don't see any wiggle room there. So somebody must be madly crossing things off the schedule.
Asking go back to this line of succession, though. There's no reason why there's no one been chosen?
Well, this is an active reporting target for us, as we like to say in the White House unit, and to see why that would happen, I don't know. But there is no member of a Trump cabinet at this point, and so it could then revert to the Speaker of the House, of course, and he's also present, and so forth.
Well, let's listen to some of the music as the ceremony gets underway.
I will be.
Chris Macchio there, a New York native. He's been singing for President-elect Trump for years. Sang at the 2020 RNC, in 2024 that Madison Square Garden rally. He calls himself Trump's favorite singer, and he delivered today.
And we saw President Biden and Vice President Harris enter a few moments ago. Also, Vice President-elect Vance.
And now the members of Congress, congressional leaders Mike Johnson, Amy Klobuchar,
the
Senator
clerk
Schumer,
of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Kevin F. McCumber.
It's worth
Mr.
noting,
John Bessler,
when President-elect
Mrs.
Trump
Kelly
is sworn
Johnson,
into office, he
Mrs.
will place his
Iris
hand
Weintraub
on
Schumer,
two Bibles,
and
one
Mrs.
given to him
Jennifer Scalise.
by his mother and the iconic Lincoln Bible, which is, of course, the Bible that former President Obama used when he was sworn into
and these are
office.
the Bibles he was sworn in on 8 years ago as well.
And here is Donald Trump. And soon to be First Lady Melania Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States, ranking member of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Deb Fischer, House Democratic Leader, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Majority Secretary, the Honorable Robert Duncan. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden Jr., and Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Kamala Devi Harris.
Perhaps the final time he hears "Hail to the Chief."
As President,
Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the Vice President-elect, the Executive Director for the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Mr. Michael Wagner, Senate Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms and Doorkeeper, Jason Bell, and House Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms, Mr. Sean Keating. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President-elect of the United States, the Honorable J.D. Vance. Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the President-elect, the Staff Director for the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Elizabeth Farah, House Sergeant-at-Arms, the Honorable William P. McFarland, Senate Sergeant-at-Arms and Doorkeeper, the Honorable Jennifer A. Hemingway, Senate Majority Leader, the Honorable John Thune, and the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, House Democratic Leader, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, House Majority Leader, the Honorable Steve Scalise, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson, Senate Democratic Leader, the Honorable Charles E. Schumer, Ranking Member of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Deb Fischer, and Chairwoman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar. Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Please welcome the Chairwoman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 60th presidential inauguration. Today, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance will take their oaths of office, and we will witness the peaceful transfer of power at the heart of our democracy. For the past year, I've chaired the inaugural ceremony committee, which includes the leadership of Congress from both parties. We thank the committee and Capitol staff and law enforcement who worked so hard over the last year, and especially the last 3 days. You've done a beautiful job, and you have shown grace under pressure. Our theme this year is our enduring democracy. The presence of so many presidents and vice presidents here today is truly a testament to that endurance. We welcome President Biden and Dr. Biden. We welcome Vice President Harris and Doug Emhoff, President Obama, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, President Bush and Laura Bush, Vice President Pence, Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle. The justices of the United States Supreme Court are with us, all 9 of them, I counted, and of course, the Trump and Vance families. This ceremony marks what will soon be 250 years of our democracy. It is the moment when leaders, elevated by the will of the people, promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, the guardians of our country. Through war and peace, through adversity and prosperity, we hold this inauguration every 4 years. And today it falls on Martin Luther King Day. A further reminder that we must strive to uphold the values enshrined in our Constitution, the freedoms, the liberties, and, as is inscribed on the entrance of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. But what makes this moment more than a passing ceremony is all who are watching it across the country, the people of this nation, the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. President Kennedy, who at one point worked as a senator in this building and would often walk through this very rotunda, once said, "In a democracy, every citizen, regardless of interest in politics, holds office. Every one of us is in a position."
Break into this for a moment because we have some breaking news we want to share related to all this. President Biden pardoning his family members minutes before President-elect Trump is sworn in. I want to go to our senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett. Laura, walk us through it.
Yeah, Lester, a rare and sweeping pardon here from the president in just his final moments while he still occupies that office, pardoning all of his living siblings and their spouses, including James Biden, Sarah Biden, Valerie Owens Biden, his sister, her husband, John T. Owens, and his brother, Francis Biden. Now, Lester, none of these people have been charged with crimes, but he says he's doing this because there's partisan politics here, obviously referring to the president-elect who is set to take office just minutes from now, Lester. Again, he's saying he's doing this as a preemptive pardon, something we have seen, something sweeping but very rare, Lester.
And Laura, none of this is reversible. The next President Trump can't reverse this.
No, he can't, Lester. These are binding. They have the force of law. Courts recognize them, but we should note it doesn't stop Congress from investigating, and they have pledged specifically to come after James Biden, Lester.
All right, Laura Jarrett, thanks very much. We'll talk more on that, but let's rejoin now at the Capitol, where we're just moments away from President-elect Trump taking the oath of office.
Has endured. So, as we inaugurate a new president and vice president, let us remember that the power of those in this room comes from the people. The construction workers who build our country, the teachers and healthcare workers who nurture us, the troops defending our freedoms, and yes, the firefighters in Los Angeles putting themselves on the line for us. Our democracy's strength and grit must match theirs. May God bless our nation. Thank you. Good afternoon. Endurance through the years is the ultimate test. To persevere through time is the truest measure of an idea, an institution, and a nation. Our founders wrote the Constitution so that America could withstand all the twists and turns of time. They wrote it to guide us and to preserve forever our right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as much as the truths and principles enshrined in our Constitution remain the same, our democracy promises the American people the power to change, to chart their own destiny. That's the beauty. That is the importance of democracy. It allows the endurance, the permanence of a nation through change. It allows nations like our United States both to avoid the obstacles and to seize the opportunities God has placed before us, all while staying true to our founding principles. Today is our country's 60th inauguration ceremony. Like all the others before it, it is a celebration of our right to set our uniquely American course. The past several years have been trying at times for many, many Americans, and also for the nations of the free world that we humbly strive to lead. In November, Americans chose again to steer this nation towards greatness, the secure, safe, and prosperous future that our founders envisioned for all of us. And today, we celebrate not only their decision to do so, but also the simple right and wisdom of a free people to make their own choice so that their nation might endure. And now, allow me to welcome Archbishop Timothy Dolan and Reverend Franklin Graham, who will deliver our invocation. Please rise.
Be still and know that I am God, supreme among the nations, supreme on the earth. Let us pray. Remembering General George Washington on his knees at Valley Forge, recalling Abraham Lincoln at his second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Remembering General George Patton's instructions to his soldiers as they began the Battle of the Bulge 8 decades ago. Pray. Pray when fighting. Pray alone. Pray with others. Pray by night. Pray by day. Observing the birthday of the Reverend Martin Luther King, who warned, without God, our efforts turn to ashes. We, blessed citizens of this one nation under God, humbled by our claim that in God we trust, gather indeed this Inauguration Day to pray for our President Donald J. Trump, his family, his advisors, his cabinet, his aspirations, his vice president, for the Lord's blessings upon Joseph Biden, for our men and women in uniform, for each other whose hopes are stoked this new year, this Inauguration Day. We cannot err in relying upon that prayer from the Bible, upon which our president will soon place his hand and oath, as we make our own the supplications of King Solomon for wisdom as he began his governance. God of our fathers, in your wisdom you set man to govern your creatures, to govern in holiness and justice, to render justice with integrity. Give our leader wisdom, for he is your servant, aware of his own weakness and brevity of life. If wisdom which comes not from you be not with him, he shall be held in no esteem. Send wisdom from heavens, that she may be with him, that he may know your designs. Please, God, bless America. Please, mend her every flaw. You are the God in whom we trust, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
Mr. President, the last 4 years, there are times I'm sure you thought it was pretty dark. But look what God has done. We praise him and give him glory. Let us pray. Our Father and our God, thou hast said, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. As the prophet Daniel prayed, blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings. He raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Our Father, today, as President Donald J. Trump takes the oath of office once again, we come to say thank you, O Lord our God. Father, when Donald Trump's enemies thought he was down and out, you and you alone saved his life and raised him up with strength and power by your mighty hand. We pray for President Trump that you'll watch over, protect, guide, direct him. Give him your wisdom from your throne on high. We ask that you would bless him and that our nation would be blessed through him. We also ask that you would bless and protect Melania as First Lady. We thank you for the beauty, the warmth, and grace that she shows not only to this nation, but to the whole world. We thank you for Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and his wife Usha and their young family. May he be a strength to President Trump, to stand beside him, to hold up his arms like Aaron held up the arms of Moses in the midst of battle. The prophet Samuel reminded the people, it was you that brought them up from the land of Egypt. And he said, now stand still that I may reason with you before the Lord. So Father, we take this moment to stand still, to remember the great things that you have done for this nation. Thank you for the protection, the bounty, the freedoms that we remember to keep our eyes fixed on you. And may our hearts be inclined to your voice. We know that America can never be great again if we turn our backs on you. We ask for your help, and we pray all of this in the name of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, your Son, my Savior, and our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Associate Justice Kavanaugh to administer the Vice Presidential Oath of Office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance to the same.
And allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
on
which I am about to enter.
So
help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
J.D. Vance taking the oath of office just a minute before noon here on the East Coast, becoming the 50th Vice President of the United States, the third youngest.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Justice Roberts to administer the presidential oath of office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Canyons resonating across Washington, D.C. right now as Donald Trump becomes the 47th President of the United States. The swearing in occurring just about a minute after 12 o'clock here in the East. Kristen, describe the era that we're about to launch into.
Well, this is yet another unprecedented moment. We are watching the greatest political comeback in modern American political history. Someone who's very familiar with what it means to be the President of the United States, what it takes to pass legislation, and yet he returns to the Oval Office in a very different backdrop. He has control, Republicans have control of the House, of the Senate. The Supreme Court has a conservative majority, and President Trump now has had 4 years to reflect on this job that he will embark on yet again.
By the way, 20th Amendment alert. It holds that the previous term expires at noon. Whether or not you're sworn in, that term expires and President Trump becomes president. But they made it pretty close to the wire.
It was a nail biter.
I think J.D. Vance was sworn in just before noon, and President Trump a couple minutes after. So frantically, they definitely squished the schedule.
Yeah, dialing up my favorite constitutional lawyer, but yeah, just to check on that. You know, one of the things we're going to see in this inaugural address now from President Trump, there's a question mark. His aides have suggested it's going to be about renewing confidence and restoring hope. I think back to this moment when we were all in very different seats, a little chillier back in 2017, when he delivered a speech that is widely known now as the American Carnage speech, where he talked about the idea that there has been American carnage in this country. It was seen as dark and ominous, and so I think there is a question. It was a 16-minute speech then. I think there is a question as to the tone and tenor of these remarks now. President Trump's first remarks to the nation in his second historic term in office.
I'm really struck by the fact that moving it indoors did not seem to take away any of the spectacle, the regal quality of that, the majesty of the office. I don't like to use terms that suggest monarchy, but the language kind of leads me that way. So this space in the rotunda really is a cathedral of democracy, and this ceremony moved from what would have been a sweeping and beautiful West Front is quite stunning in how it's playing out. He is the 47th president, but there are 45 who have held the office because of the double term.
And the battle hymn of the Republic. Let's listen.
It is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you the 45th and the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.